Good evening, folks. You're live from Normandy in France. Actually, my name is Mark Gray, and I'm about 30 minutes from Rouen, which is a city in northern Normandy, west of Paris. Carrie gave me the honor to participate in the project for the Project Camelot TV show, and I'm really honored to be part of it. Let me introduce myself. I've been handling monthly UFO community dinner events in France since 2011, and I've been leading and translating numerous interviews with contactees, experiencers, and various UFO researchers around the world, and speakers during those events, and also for several web radio shows. And I've been a guest speaker myself, more in French than in English, but since I've spent about 14 years in Florida, in the US, back in the days, I guess I can get by in English. But I'm a French native. I've also been on various web radio shows in France, the US, and Canada, among which recently, the Starseed radio show with Jonah Bolt, also the Project Freedom Radio show with Bobby Keegan in Canada, Belleville, Ontario, also LGC2, which is a French web radio. It's called Le Grand Changement, which is known also in Quebec and all the French-speaking countries. BTLV, which is a web radio in Paris, where I speak every month. Bob vous dit toute la vérité is what BTLV stands for. And also Fréquence Évasion, which is in the south of France, near Monaco, Monte Carlo. Also the Lovely Show in Quebec, and ODH TV and UFO Conscience in France. And I've put together the first Congress offering, showing conferences on exo contact, where last year in France, actually in June of 2014, where I had many guest speakers, among which Carrie Cassidy, and my guest speakers have come from all over the world, in the US, in Canada, in Australia, the UK, Italy, Peru, Argentina, Belgium, Portugal, etc., and via Skype or on site. I put together a conference for Carrie Cassidy in Paris, actually in September of last year, so it's been a year, at Dorothy's Gallery, which is an American art gallery in Paris, and she covered the following topics: the Matrix, the Black Projects, and ET presence, friends or foes. That was the topics that she covered. I've also interviewed many other speakers, among which the American and Canadian ones. Michelle Walling last Saturday, actually, it was my latest UFO event. Edgar Mitchell, whom you all probably know, Brian Foster, who is also a host on the show, Lloyd Pye, who's no longer with us, and David Jacobs, Neil Freer, Yves Lorgan, Corrado Malanga in Italy, Jacques Grimaud, who may be renowned abroad for his documentary, which is had a lot of success, called Revelation of the Pyramids. Also Peter Robbins, Mary Rodwell in Australia, Barbara Lamb, Cynthia Crawford, Bridget Nielsen, Viviane Chauvet, Rebecca Hardcastle, Sasha Lisson, Alfred Weber, Michael Schratt, Randy Kramer, Joanne Summerskells in the UK, Ray Hernandez, whom I talked about, and several others who are French and whom you may not know, actually. So my professional background is not important. I come from the executive world. I've had a business degree in Paris, and over 20 years of business-to-business sales and marketing. But I've awoken mainly 4 years ago, I would say. I consider myself a starseed, and I'm happy to be with you tonight to present you a French tour of ufology, which is very special. You'll see that we deal with a lot of debunking in France, as you may also in the US. and around the world. And basically, we're going to start with this tour of French ufology in history, where we'll go from the debunkers to the ET experiencers, who are truly among us. And there, a lot of things are happening in France, as opposed to what the officials are trying to say, and the pseudo UFO researchers who say that there's not much that goes on in France. Actually, it's totally the contrary. We're going to start with the worldwide 1954 wave that has actually been happening in October of 54 in France. You'll see the map on the PowerPoint that that I put up. Okay, we're on the slide 3. There you go. Where you'll see the map of the distribution of UFO reports for October 3rd, 1954. It's showing straight lines or 4 or more points, which actually led a very famous French reporter who wrote a book called À propos des soucoupes volantes in the 50s. In 58, actually, he published it. It was called Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery. His name was Aimé Michel, which we may want to switch to the next slide over, which shows again the UFO wave. We can stay on that one if you can see it. It's actually a few newspaper reports back in the days. Hardly anyone is still alive today that remembers those personal experiences what transpired back in the days. No, to my knowledge, no English language television documentaries have talked about it, have ever been produced about the waves, the UFO waves in 1954, as far as I know. And as a general rule, Americans and Canadians are less familiar with these events than we are here, which is like it's a big classic in France and Europe. I don't know, but in France, it's the biggest wave that has really struck our minds, basically. There's been a lot of hoaxes put out by French newspapers, as it has been in the U.S. with the National Enquirer tabloid, who was started by a former CIA agent. I forgot his name, but you may know him. And in France, it was basically the same. They produced a bunch of hoaxes in newspaper articles to discredit all the happenings in 1954. There was a flurry of misidentified lights in the sky, but also a flurry of real reports of landings, car pursuits, and also even a humanoid encounter. And some beings were seen in the fields picking up lavender and other grassroots and all kinds of plants. Actually, they were collecting plant samples, organic samples. It was kind of strange. And it's generally known, this 1954 UFO wave, as the first large-scale French and European UFO wave. Most of the reports were French, and Aimé Michel, as I said, popularized it in his book. It would be more correct to say that the UFO wave was worldwide, but because 42% of the UFO sightings were made from locations outside of Europe. Let's go to the next slide, if we can. On the French 1990 UFO waves, which happened 30 years later. There we go. There we go. Well, we're still in the 1954 wave. There was so many of those. Okay, there we go. 1990 UFO wave in France. It took place in November November 5th of 1990. It's the most infamous recent UFO sighting wave that was made by at least 1,000 citizens in France. Actually, this book by Frank Marie, who investigated this wave, UFO wave, in the 90s, collected over 400 sightings all over France. There was some close UFO contacts, close encounters, and very strange flashing lights were observed throughout the night sky all over France. And they, of course, identified it. Well, I'm talking about the government officials and the mainstream press, with a Russian rocket that fell back down from our stratosphere and was scattered all over France. And they associated those sightings with this rocket, this Russian Soviet rocket in the 90s, and of course, French officials were hustling to the sites to investigate all over the place. So, as I said, over 1,000 witnesses saw flashing lights in the sky, and if it was simply a rocket fragment falling back into Earth's atmosphere, we wouldn't have so many testimonies of people such as Alain Delon, who's a famous French actor that you may know in the U.S., who also witnessed and testified about his UFO sighting on French TV back then. There's some old footage from the 90s where he's being interviewed by Strauss-Kahn's former wife, ex-wife, Anne Sinclair, whom you may have heard of also. She was a journalist back then. So we do not have the least proof that extraterrestrials are behind this unexplained phenomena. Say Patnay. Patnay was the former director of the JPAN. JPAN back then. We'll see what the JPAN is about later on. And he said also, he added, nor do we have the least proof that they aren't. Which is some kind of recognition or acknowledgement that something really happened. Let's go to the next slide if we can. Yeah, we mentioned Amy Michel, who's a UFO investigative journalist. And a very famous one. Yeah, let's go back to the other one. He wrote a theory about in his book à propos des soucoupes, flying saucers in a straight line mystery, about the ley lines that were crossing, that were going across France. He was the first one to write about those ley lines and energy lines that would be more favorable to open up maybe frequencies so that UFOs would appear in the French skies back then. So his book and his honest investigative work were praised and are still praised today. He's the one that popularized this UFO wave and ufology in France back in the days. Another writer and journalist, Jimmy Guilleux. The next slide. The next slide about Jimmy Guilleux. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. He wrote many sci-fi fiction novels, and but was also famous for his reports in UFO investigations. He's the one who wrote about the big American UFO secrecy and conspiracies that are not theories, actually. And he was very renowned and talked about all the very sensitive cases that we'll mention tonight during the show. Okay, Jimmy Guilleux was very suspiciously deceased. Actually, his death is very controversial. Some close friends of his are saying that he was actually he was actually killed through a uranium fragment that was placed under his seat, so that it would give him cancer. So that's a theory we can't. It's something that we cannot verify, but it's a theory that was backed up by many of his friends. So let's go to the next slide. And Jimmy Guilleux actually talked about the French Salon. The French Salon is basically called the French Salon in English, but it's called the base of the Plateau d'Albion. It's the global surveillance system affiliated with the Echelon network on a European level. It's the NSA, the French NSA, basically, that has those big antennas that are surveilling the it's the French signal intelligence system, basically. It's called the Echelon, the counterpart of the American Echelon network. It's been officially acknowledged by French authorities since the European Parliament investigated Echelon, and also its implications in counter terrorism. And the system is operated by the DGAC, which is the French NSA, basically, and it's located in the largest station is in the Dôme region near Sarlat in the Périgord region, which is southeast France. There's other stations in France, but this is the most famous because Jimmy Guilleux talked about it, and we'll see what happens there. There's been testimonies by Jimmy Guilleux and other UFO researchers. There was cattle mutilations in the surrounding areas back in the 80s and 90s. It used to be the old nuclear silo until during the Cold War, until it was closed down and reopened again with 1,000 legionnaires on site, and we have testimonies that there's been many UFO sightings around there. And also I have a report from a UK group which does the biolocation dowsing method, which allows to test for non-terrestrial materials, non-terrestrial presence, and also all types of indications of matter, and through carbon-14, and also through colors, and testing on Google Maps, Google Earth maps that those English guys actually test and investigate with. And it's very precise because they've been helping the British police for several decades now to find corpses and victims of murders and police investigations, and they've been pretty accurate. And for the last few years, they have been dedicating their work to identifying ley lines, strange non-terrestrial presence, abductions, presence of ETs, presence of ships, crafts on board, and investigating the bases. And I'm going to show you the test results from this British team about the Albion French Salon base. It's the next slide over, I think. Yes. So it's a little small on there, so I guess we cannot really make it bigger. But I guess I think Carrie will put up the PowerPoint I put together later on, so you can check it out. Basically, what this team, the biolocation team from the UK, found out in this French Salon base in France is that there's an underground tunnel. With a vortex, artificial vortex. There's some bismuth, which is a material that is used to block sensing. And they found some alien presence in the tunnels, and also it's of course radiations, because traces of radiations and nuclear radiations, because it used to be a nuclear silo for nuclear missiles during the Cold War, and also traces of metals, UFO-related metals, non-earthly metals, and uranium, and also the one side of the tunnel, underground tunnel, underneath the base, pointed towards planet Mars, which is actually in the news today. Okay, let's switch to the next one. That was a pretty stunning report from those professional dowsers in the UK. All right. Yes. So you all know probably Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée is famous for a few of his books and his work in ufology. He's very well known. He was actually the character of Jacques Vallée was played by François Truffaut, who is a French movie director, who's really renowned, and in the movie Spielberg's movie with Alan Hynek in it, and Jacques Vallée was played by François Truffaut in Encounters of the Third Type, and his character was famous among the French UFO researchers. It's been very controversial because it seemed that he was, according to the Benevitz, the Dulce guy, he was part of the Aviary team. What is the Aviary? It's basically the Aviary is a in the late 70s, early 80s, Paul Benevitz, who lived in New Mexico, he was intrigued by some comments of secret messages that the general public were unaware of, and that there was a covert collaboration between elements of the U.S. establishment and an alien force. And with this in mind, he started to put together an amount of information about that he intercepted in investigated radio signals. To make it short, you probably all know the Dulce papers, and he approached Bill Moore. Bill Moore, he was a former special agent in an Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and he asked him to monitor and report back on the activities of Benevitz. Basically, to make it short, what is the Aviary? They found out that according to the Aviary, according to Moore and Shandera, Jaime Shandera, another ufologist in the 80s, the Aviary was a group of individuals who, rather than being just a number of low-grade intel agents, were working or had worked at very high levels with very high security clearances. And it's almost certain that they became involved in the UFO phenomenon in the early 70s. It included both active and retired military and intel officers. And their primary objective was to make known to the general public details of the government's involvement with ETs and technologies that were back engineered and gained from crashed UFOs. So it's more than probable that the members of this Aviary team, who are supposed to be disinformants, had joined forces in order to gather information on the Majestic 12. So they were part of the MJ12 team as well, and they had been involved with access to secret files, and they would gather information which would provide them with greater understanding of the above top secret shadow group, the MG12, and so they're a group of individuals that are basically putting out some disinformation, and there's suspicion that Jacques Vallée is one of them. He's a NASA employee, and he's always worked for NASA and for the French government, also in the UFO investigation. So all those members had bird names, and they were giving him bird names. That's why they were called collectively the aviary. So, that's Moore and Chandera that decided to give them pseudonyms. So Jacques Vallée, who's a Defense Department computer expert, was called the Partridge. It was previously investigated. He previously investigated UFOs for the French government. That's what I said. Let's go to the next slide and talk about the Camelot report, I think. Oh, no, we're at the CNES. Basically, the CNES is the French NASA. In 1977, the National Space Agency of France, the CNES, that's sending out the Ariane rocket out of Kourou, Guyana, French Guyana, to put satellites, in orbit around the Earth. The CNES has been helping civilian and military authorities understand the nature of UFOs, or PANs, which is called PAN in French, unidentified aerospace phenomena. And they used a special unit back in the days that was called the SEPRA, the Aerospace Phenomena Study Department. It was based also at the CNES Center Technical Center in Toulouse. And since 1977, they've developed a precise methodology and so forth. And the problem with the GEPAN, the SEPRA became the GEPAN, GEPAN, and in first called the GEPAN in 1977, and the SEPRA in 1988, and also it became afterwards in the late 90s the GEPAN, or the early year 2002 or so. It became the legal. The government sponsored official French UFO research program. The problem with that is that they have very little funding, and they've had the same statistics. They've produced the same statistics forever. There's only 22% of unexplained real unexplained cases, and it hasn't moved from there for decades. And they've been accused of actually hiding from the public eye any sensitive UFO sighting case or any close encounter case that has been happening, and especially all the cases involving nuclear sites, power plants, nuclear bases that have encountered and also observed, and where UFO sighting reports have been classified actually by them. So they're supposed to be all over France, and they've only have a few IPNs all over the country with very little funding. Like I said, it's sort of like the MUFON France. The version of the MUFON in France is even less active. So it's basically also a classifying agency that works for the government, for the French government. So lots of intel, more than likely, in it. And it's made of a whole team of skeptics who are in there to actually classify and make sure all the misinterpretations of UFO sightings or put forward, or the Chinese lanterns are put forward as a sighting, and to replace the UFO sightings, which are in place. Actually, the SEPRA database back in the days was comprised of more than 2,200 different cases, with some 6,000 eyewitnesses, witness accounts, and approximately 100 sightings from aircraft. And since then, it's been UFO sighting galore in France, but there's nothing happening in France. That's what they tell you. The funny thing about Japan is that it's usually shown abroad as the pride of France. France is the only country, from your perspective, in the U.S. or anywhere else where they speak about Japan, is that we are the only country that puts out a real official government agency that investigates UFO cases. But you don't know, of course, you don't know what they're really doing. They're just basically muzzled all the sensitive cases and all the close encounter cases, and they just talk about Chinese lanterns rather than Chinese light instead of real UFOs. So that's basically what I was saying, that we're a country that debunks, and also most of the, you'll see a few of the logos there. Well, if they watch me tonight or later on, they'll recognize themselves. Basically, there are many UFO debunkers in ufology in France. It's just it's so infected. They have managed to start fights between groups that were actually willing to investigate serious cases and also listen to ET experiencers in France. They're the first debunking. Well, you'll see a few of the debunkers there in the photos. They'll recognize themselves, and I won't name them. But there's, of course, it's all linked to the French government. You have the IHEDN, which is the basically a school for the defense sector officers, and there's also the 3AAF, which used to be the Commission Sigma. The Academy d'Ufologie is Ufology Academy, and they're all pretty much connected because they also brief some of them officers in the French military, especially the Air Force, and the SGDN, which is the National Defense General Secretary, is basically especially directing the whole all the efforts of the UFO debunkers who are making themselves known as true UFO researchers looking for the truth and disclosure, which is actually, you may know, they're in there to hide all sensitive information from the public eye, or basically take the disclosure movement or the disclosure timing and pace process to their credit, and they want to monitor it so that it helps their agenda. So all those insiders in ufology groups are creating conflicts between ufology associations and groups who are legitimate at first, and then they're being said, don't mention this, don't mention that, this information should not be out, this is not credible. There is no ET encounters, there is no ETs where man is the only species in the universe, and basically what they're doing in ufology is debunking. basically. You know what debunking is. There's actually one guy in the photo here that was in I think it was in Vegas or in Phoenix at a UFO Congress, because the French government, actually, because they're all linked to the defense industry, the French government funds their UFO conferences around the world so that they can debunk all the cases. And actually, Paola Harris herself told me about this debunker here in the photo, who was, he's French, he debunked the Innsville UFO sighting case from the 50s. And the photos, you know, the black and white photos by the Innsville farmers, and actually everybody laughed at them because of course, back in the 50s, there was no Photoshop. Let's go to the next slide. So this is another strange case that involved in December, mid-December 2013. There was a witness that testified that a UFO or a TR-3B, which it was the description was matching the TR-3B, was hovering over the Thales Air Systems site in Forges-les-Bains, in France, that was developing. The Thales Air Systems basically develops some satellite and defense systems that's very advanced. And this witness actually talked about black helicopters from the gendarmerie, and also described a UFO. A UFO that looked exactly like a TR-3B, and also he saw it twice, and he saw it flying over his house. So it's basically very significant of what the cooperation may have happened with the French defense industry on maybe on the secret space program level, and you know, because they say that nothing happens in France, and there may be some back engineering or deals or recouped technology that was witnessed there, or maybe it was an extraterrestrial craft that was warning about the advanced satellite system that would have perturbed maybe or disturbed the whole planet. We don't know, but the description of this craft looks a little bit like the one by Barney and Betty Hill, but also looks like a TR-3B, like you can see on the pictures. Let's go to the next slide, because we're not gonna go into depth. Okay, so this is this is very important because there's been UFO sightings which have been called drones over power plants all over France. All the power plants have been hovered, have been flown over, and there's been some total denial from the mainstream media and secrecy about those drones who were actually UFOs, because even a power plant director mentioned that he was they saw a UFO flying over the power plant. So it's been a big affair here, and many sites have been visited because the drones cannot fly that far in the no-fly zone around the power plant. Greenpeace even said it wasn't them, because they blamed it on Greenpeace first, because they also demonstrated once and went inside penetrated a no entry zone in a power plant. So this was the big affair, but it was actually effective all over Europe. I believe power plants in Germany and somewhere else. I think in Belgium and Austria were were visited also by those drones. So this was the big affair of the end of over a few months period. In France and the rest of Europe, power plants have been visited. So there's a lot of secrecies going on. Going on. Anything that's connected to nuclear energy is protected, is classified, is denied, because, as you know, France is pretty much the main lobby internationally with Areva in the nuclear power. Let's go to the next slide. And it's always been sensitive with the UFO phenomenon. So this nuclear submarine base in Brest in Brittany, called the Elong, it's not Long Island, but it's in Brittany. There's been many UFO drone sightings, and on the base we have reports of soldiers, military soldiers with missing times, and they were found in days. And with missing times and without their weapons sometimes on the base. And some beings that were not non-terrestrials were observed as well. We're not in sci-fi movie. Over here, we're in a real testimony through insider sources that we have. And it's not mainstream. It's totally confidential what I'm telling you, but now you'll know. Also, there's been some biolocation remote testing done with Google Earth mapping of this area, this submarine, nuclear submarine site in Brittany by the British team that I work with, and the results are on the next slide, I believe. Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, let's go back to the previous slide, where we can show you where it's located. And that's what I was telling you. Drones or UFOs or drones FOs as we call them over here have been hovering over the nuclear submarine base. The French soldiers were found in a daze and with missing times on the base. Non-terrestrial beings were sighted among them, and you'll see on the map that it's near the Brest area in the western part of Brittany. And okay, all right, let's go to the next. Oh, so those are the results, which is pretty amazing by the British dowsing team. What they've tested and what their findings are about, basically, is that they found the same traces of bismuth, this material used to block sensing, and also that there's some unearthly metals, non-terrestrial unearthly metals traces. They work with numbers. They work with some dowsing methods, with colors, with carbon-14. Once again, this is their methods, and it's been effective for decades with the British, the UK Police Department. So it's pretty effective with non-terrestrial substances and presence. It seems like there's a very large alien human. Let me see. I'm looking at the results here. This area has traces of alien abductions and also alien encounters. There's some sphere crafts that have been identified near this nuclear submarine base, and also some alien presence, unearthly metals, and also some strong response to antimatter in the area. Some anomalies respond in the arrows. You'll see the map. We'll post it afterwards. And also, which is kind of strange, it shows an area that leads, same as the vortex, the artificial vortex in Albion underground, to the Orion system. So it leads, there's an opening, a portal in this base. That's what was diagnosed and tested and found by this British team, a link to the Orion system. He saw the Orion symbol. So there's a link to the Orion constellation. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right. So now let's talk about the Camelot report, because the Camelot report was very important as well, and that's as famous as the Japan overseas, and that's something that you believe is crucial, is very important, is major in French ufology. What is the Camelot report? Basically, it's a study, a 2-year military study that was published in 1999, and who put it together? It was entitled UFOs in Defense. What must we be prepared for? In French, Les ovnis et la défense. À quoi doit-on se préparer? This 90-page report is basically an in-depth study of UFOs. That covered many aspects of the subject, especially the questions, and that's very important, of national defense. So it's basically produced by a team, a military team, a former general. The study was carried out over several years by a supposedly independent group of former auditors at the Institute, which is what I was mentioning, and you saw the logo among the debunkers earlier of the IHEDN, which is linked to the defense industry and the national security, the Advanced Studies for National Defense, or IHEDN, and by qualified experts from various fields. And before it was released publicly, it was sent to the French president back then, Jacques Chirac, and to the Prime Minister, Lionel Jospin. And the report was prefaced by General Bernard Morlin of the Air Force and the former IHEDN director. And it begins with a preamble by André Lebeau, who's the former president of the National Center for Space Studies, the CNES, also the French NASA. So it's all government linked and all government information and sponsored by the government, the French equivalent of NASA. The group itself, collective author of the report, is an association of experts, many of whom are and have been auditors of the IHEDN, where it's presided over by General Denis Letty of the Air Force, former auditor of the IHEDN. So what's the result? That that report didn't make a large audience. It didn't reach a large audience. It was published in the VSD, which was a newspaper, a magazine back then, and didn't reach that many people in France. I believe that they reach more people overseas than in France. It's kind of like the Japan thing, and it's a military study. So what's their conclusion? The conclusion is we should be scared of what's out there coming at us. As a national security, our air defense system is inoperable, is not efficient. We need more budgets to fight the hypothetical invader. They may be a danger. Sounds like Stephen Hawking's latest quotes. Like they could be dangerous. So that's basically the Camelot report, a 3-year military study on UFOs. It's all French intel, it's all French military, and it's all geared towards spending and asking for more budgets for the military. So it's also, there's a parallel we can draw with Ronald Reagan space shield, the space war, secret space program budgeting that he pushed. That's an agenda he pushed. And in France, we had the Camelot report, which was supposed to make more of a hit with the French audience, but they didn't care that much. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, so this is the very sensitive information and a scoop. Dr. Stephen Greer, and we're waiting for his fax confirmation. A friend of mine is going to get his fax confirmation from the article that was published recently. Stephen Greer made contact with ETs for the French Ministry of Defense, and there's a fax copy that was sent to Dr. Greer, was asking for a CE5 meeting with Greer, and it confirms that the French officials actually saw aliens. So that was the big scoop, basically. Let's go to the next slide. All right, we can see a few names in ufology that we recognize in our end here. I know they're not going to be happy to see themselves on this slideshow, but it's not important. The truth is important. What I wanted to say is basically that the main characters mentioned in the document, Stephen Greer's document, are Pierre Morin, who we haven't been able to find who he was back then, but he was probably part of the MOD as well. So it was ordered by the Ministry of Defense by Pierre Morin, Alain Boudier, who's also part of the 3AF, the group that I mentioned earlier, with Jean-Gabriel Grillet, and also Philippe de la Messurière. He is mentioned in the, all those guys are mentioned in the Camelot report. So there's also an agency that is supposed to collect samples and analyze chemicals and organic samples, and also non-terrestrial artifacts and implants. That's called the sporade, where Alain Boudier is linked to, and which we have here. What we have here is Philippe de la Messurière is an intel agent that worked for the French intelligence. Is also part of the Camelot report, and was very close with Dr. Michael Wolff, whom you may know, who worked for the U.S. defense industry for a while on the secret space program and projects, and also extraterrestrial connected projects. And this parade agency is listed online, and we have witnesses that actually testified, and that I won't name them, but that some samples and also hypnotic regression videos and also artifacts were kept and held back from them by this agency, or people who were connected to this agency, which is all basically intel, French intel. So what does Stephen Greer says? He says, and you'll see the photo on the photo there. It's on the slideshow. That's that the French MOD contacted aliens during a bizarre experiment. It was in the UK Express newspaper online. Dr. Greer, who claims also that he's threatened by men in black on a weekly basis, he said that top French MOD officials summoned an alien craft in 2010 during a CE5 session. And it was confirmed on radar, that's what he says, as passing overhead at 120,000 miles per hour. He also claimed that an alien ambassador from the Andromeda galaxy partially materialized in front of the French leaders during the experiment on a sealed-off 220-acre estate. It had a no-fly zone above to prevent any normal aircraft passing. So what do we have here? We have officials, intel agents. We have the Camelot report guys. We have Alain Boudier, who was part of the Sigma Commission and the 3AF. We have Jean-Gabriel Grellet, and who else do we have? We have another debunker who was at the UFO Congress in the U.S. Debunking the Innsville farmer UFO sighting in front of a panel of American UFO researchers who laughed at him. And we have also in the group there of the Commission Sigma, we have a famous astronaut, Jean-François Clairvoy, who's flown on the space shuttle a couple times. So we have all the NASA, the French NASA guys. We have the so-called former officers, military and defense, UFO researchers who are all linked to French intel and the French government. So just think back a second and evaluate the information that they can put out. They've actually testified that they have met. They've never testified or officially testified that they have met with Dr. Greer or attended a CE5 session yet. But that's the scoop for the evening. But there'll be a lot more in the future, in future shows where I'll bring on some speakers from France and I'll translate back and forth, or from all over Europe. So there's some real French experiencers in France. I can attest to that because I've been interviewing quite a few of them. I've also met with Free, which is a group presided by Ray Hernandez and Edgar Mitchell, who wants to be a support group for experiencers, and I'm offering their support and their backing over here to the experiencers who want to testify and have somebody to talk to that is not government intel, that is not defense industry, that is not going to keep and hold back their implants or non-terrestrial samples or materials or any testimonies or hypnotic regressions from them, and give them credit for their experiences and be respectful of their status as experiencers, because they know the truth about alien and ET and star being encounters. The Sporade Agency, like as I said, I don't know if we can go to the next slide. Yes, that's the one. That's an agency that's listed, and that is basically retaining and analyzing those non-terrestrial materials, and it's an official agency. It's sort of like the the Men in Black over here, huh? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I guess we can wrap this up within an hour, and it's pretty good for a first show. Solutions. What are the solutions to all this? The first thing is basically for French experiencers over here in France and anywhere in the world, not to be afraid of coming forward and testifying and talk about, share their experiences, and because not everyone is a government agent or is intel or is a UFO debunker. It's not because we're in a transition period. We have to stop living in fear, and the elites are losing control over the ET experiencers and close encounters and the contact phenomenon. They're trying to hold it back from the public and the masses over here worldwide and in France. But they're losing control, basically. Like Paulo Coelho used to say, telling the truth and making someone cry is better than telling a lie and making someone smile. So we can handle the truth, and it's your right to say no. And I'm not asking you to go against anything. I'm asking you to circumvent and avoid confrontation with those people, even dealing with those people. If you feel that the people are not legit or not benevolent and that want to get your testimony as an experiencer, or if you have seen a UFO, just don't go and waste your time and your energy testifying with these people, because more than half of them are probably government intel. Over here, at least, everything is controlled by the government. So it's basically part of your spiritual contract. You have the right to get the truth out, get the truth out, and basically, like I was saying, the solutions is basically to share your experiences with everyone, because it's crucial. It's a major step towards acknowledgement and recognition of our multiverse and our human existence throughout the cosmos. We're not the only ones. We don't come from here. We are probably more than likely a genetic experiment, and more information are tending towards this information to come out. But the elites are trying to put their hands on all this information and make it sensitive and classify it and take it away from the French public. The last slide is basically the solutions. The solutions is to gain your sovereignty back. It's pretty easy. You say no to the lords of karma. Basically, that's go back to your spiritual contract, or connect yourself to your higher self. And the key is to raise your vibration. You cannot go against a well-funded, archon powered matrix that is artificial, and that is trying to lower your frequencies and your vibrational level. You have to do anything possible to share your experiences and share your convictions and your what you really feel inside within yourselves, to express what's important to you, which is living in a peaceful world where every day mainstream media is pounding us with war-mongering information, with false flags. We've had our share of false flags in France, from Charlie's event, Charlie Hebdo false flag, to the Thales train false flag with the so-called heroes and GIs who took down a dangerous terrorist coming out of the bathroom. And we had another false flag recently of two teenagers who were in the bathroom, and they talked about a terrorist attack or threat. And it turned out that it was just two kids who didn't pay for their tickets in the train. So every day we have those crazy false flags who have been programmed to lower our frequency. And just look beyond that. Just unplug your TV, or don't watch the news, the mainstream news, and tune into Carrie Cassidy's Project Camelot TV show. I'll be on next month, every month, and I'll be happy to present you other topics and of UFO investigation field in France or in Europe in general, or I'll have a guest over. It depends. We'll see. That's a surprise. I was really glad to meet with you tonight, and looking forward to next month. Thank you. Have a good evening. Talk to you soon.